Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another Foreman Deep Dive with your host, Ken Gilvin, as always. Sadly, not a sunny day in Scotland today. It's absolutely chucking it down with rain, but such is life of living here, I guess. So today we have got an interesting slight departure from our usual style. Deep dives are usually technical in nature, but we're going in a different direction today. We're going to be talking about vertical navigation and the pros and cons of that and why that's interesting. This came up on the mailing list about, I guess it was about 7, 8 months ago. We had some proposals from Roxanne who came up with a skeleton idea of how to do a vertical navigation for Foreman, and it got some interest. It got some discussion. There was a lot of discussion on the accompanying pull request, and it kind of petered out. It kind of went a bit quiet. So we thought it might be time to revisit that, to talk about why it's important, and to think about how we might go forward. So we're going to do this in 2 parts. We're going to have, first of all, a presentation, a sort of traditional deep dive, if you like. We're going to look at why this is important, why it's broken in Foreman right now, how this went down in other communities. So we have Serena Doyle, who's the part of the Red Hat management portfolio UI strategy, looking at how the UI works for lots of our management products. And we've also got Colleen, who works specifically on OpenShift. And so we've got some data from other communities about how this UI change went down. So I'm going to hand over to them in just a moment. And also we also have Roxanne, of course, who's our main kind of UI person for Foreman. And so I'm going to let them show their stuff, and then we're going to take this to a panel discussion. So we've got a whole bunch of people who are going to be part of that. And we're going to have a bit of a wider discussion about where we take the Foreman UI in the future. And so we definitely want your voices on this. So do be free to get involved in the usual places, YouTube live chat or the Freenode IRC channel, #theforeman. I will be monitoring those, and I will relay questions to the appropriate people. So without further ado, then, I'll hand over to Rox, and we can get this show rolling.
Good morning, or I guess afternoon for a lot of you. Thanks for having us. We're kind of excited to share this and get this discussion kind of progress it a little more. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Can everybody see what I'm looking at? Are we good? Yes? No?
Yep.
We are good.
Okay, great. All right. So we'll try to blow through this presentation a little quicker so we can get to the kind of more interactive part, because I know people have a lot of thoughts they want to be able to share and talk about. So what's going down now in Foreman? I think it's clear for most people the navigation is breaking down. It's not scalable. The number of navigational items because of plugins can sort of vary between users, which causes some kind of ebb and flow in the length of the navigation on horizontal. And one menu item specifically, the org location, as we can see up here, it actually is dynamic. And so that actually changes in length. I've seen it incredibly short. I've seen it incredibly long. That tends to push things. I've got a few examples here for anyone not familiar with how it's breaking down different breakpoints. We're going on to 2 lines, 3 lines. We've got a drop down here that's actually covering a navigational item. So you have to actually click off and back on. And then this is sort of where it breaks down to mobile, which I think the mobile interaction here could probably be improved as well. So why specifically was I looking at vertical navigation? Well, vertical navigation, it's persistent on all the breakpoints until you get right down to mobile. So it doesn't really change for the user at all. We're not having to drop to 2 or 3 levels. If it can house more menu items, just simply put. For those who don't know, I think most of us know 16:9 is actually the most common aspect ratio now. Why is this relevant? Is because users have more horizontal space now in terms of white space that's occurring on the left and right that's not being used mostly at all. So that leaves a lot of room for vertical navigation there. Transition to mobile is less disorienting because, like I said, we're no longer breaking until we get to the smallest. And because, this whole idea of the fold is not really a strong concern anymore, if you happen to have a menu that has lots of items, scrolling tends to be sort of just not a concern. So I'd like to demo really quickly what we currently have going on for Patternfly's vertical nav. And Serena, feel free to jump in, or anybody when you give a specific point to make here. But one thing that's nice is that we're actually able to toggle the icons on or off. This allows for space-saving reasons, if that's a concern, allows the user to sort of choose what they would prefer. Advanced users, we've kind of found, are kind of cool with the icons. They usually have a lot of meaning for them. But those who are just starting out might prefer this. Other features is we have a secondary nav and a tertiary nav. And one kind of neat little thing here is that these are pinnable, so they can move all the way to the left-hand side.
Sorry.
Yes?
Sorry.
Yep.
Are those screenshots? Can we increase the font size at all?
Here, I'm sure you can. I mean, so we've had, I don't want to get into too much. Some people have customized this just a little bit while keeping the overall structure the same. Do you want me to?
Because the YouTube broadcast can be very low quality. So if you've got really tiny fonts, it's very, very hard to read. And it also shows off the dynamic nature of the UI quite nicely as well. Right.
So I just blew this up manually a little bit here. Is this better for everyone to see?
Yeah, that's perfect. And I will just remind everyone who's watching on YouTube, increase the quality. If you go to the bottom right of the broadcast and change the quality, it defaults to something really terrible. So just up it to like 480p or something, and it'll be much better.
Yep. So I don't think I have to repeat myself, but I'll go through again. Pinnable options, toggle for icon. So we have pinnable tertiary and secondary in this one. One comment I guess I kind of want to make about the icons that Patternfly does try to do a good job of being consistent with icons. So if someone's had interaction with the Patternfly nav before, usually those icons should be meaningful to them already. So there shouldn't be a large learning curve there. Serena, do you have anything you'd want to add here about this at all?
Not at the moment. I'm going to cover some of those features, I think, when I talk about the other upstream projects.
Great.
Definitely come out it. Great. Thanks.
Just in case you had something to say. So this is all you, Serena. So I'll click for you. Just let me know. Okay,
great. Yeah. So you can hear me, right?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm just going to go over, why Patternfly suggests using vertical navigation. I think it was about 2.5 years ago, a bunch of products started talking about other reasons why horizontal was breaking down. So Patternfly started supporting a vertical navigation pattern and talking about the benefits of it. So, as Rox already went over why she was particularly looking at it, it's essentially covering the same issues. So it's scalable. It more readily adapts to small screen sizes. We know that not necessarily all of our users are using things on a tablet or on a mobile phone, but still when you're resizing your browser, it supports them at those sizes as well. It supports that common left to right flow, which is typical. And the other two items at the bottom of this are non-persistent secondary navigation, meaning that when you go to your secondary nav menu, it doesn't stay there consistently. It allows easy discoverability for novice or infrequent users. So by default, Patternfly does not show the secondary menu on click. It shows it on hover. And that's a really nice, easy way for people to kind of just look around and see what's available in menus when they're novice users. And then as Roxanne showed, the pinning. Pinning of tertiary navigation allows expert users to kind of stay inside of a particular area of the UI and kind of work within that area without having to continue to go back and select additional menus. So those are two nice features, what I just wanted to point out. In the next few slides, I'm going to show some different variations of upstream products that are currently using vertical nav. So Cockpit is a little bit of it's got a little bit of a twist with vertical nav as far as Patternfly is concerned. It has kind of a context selector at the top with main navigation on the left-hand side. If we go to the next screenshot, we'll show Manage IQ. So Manage IQ went from horizontal navigation to vertical about 1.5 years ago. I would say that upstream and some initial looks at this stuff in alpha and beta testing, there were a lot of concerns as well. And we actually tweaked a lot of things as far as how long the menu stayed up, how long it took for it to disappear when you move the mouse off. We actually changed the pinning icon to a pin rather than what's currently used in Patternfly. So we did make some deviations based on some user feedback and additional testing that we got just on the Manage IQ side. So this has 3 levels of menus. It implements menu pinning, and it does the icon-only toggle. Manage IQ has 2 products. If we go to the next slide, we'll see the service UI, which is much more simple. It only has primary navigation. It doesn't offer the secondary and tertiary. But again, it's consistent with its parent product. If we go to the next slide, so this is over. This is an interesting one because this is an existing product which has lasted for quite a long time, and they're just transitioning to vertical navigation. So this is what the product looks like in 4.1. And in the next slide, what you'll see is what it will look like in the release of 4.2. They're going to support 3 levels of menus, and they're going to allow that menu pinning as well as the icon-only toggle. And in a couple minutes after Colleen shows OpenShift, I'm going to talk about a survey that we did, which was related to these changes in Overt. But for now, I'll pass off to Colleen.
Great, yeah, so for OpenShift, we're also using the vertical navigation. Right now, this is what it looks like with 2 levels of menus, and the icons are actually above. We're looking to make a change. That's not quite Patternfly. We're looking to make a change. Actually, if you go to the next slide, you'll see how it'll change to take up a little bit less vertical space, so a little bit easier to scale with the icon to the left, and then we're adding the toggle for the icon-only view that Roxanne showed with the hamburger menu. So once users are more familiar, they can go down to just the icons, and then you can see builds, resources, storage there for the secondary level of navigation. No tertiaries needed right now, but I'm sure if we did add tertiary, we might think about the pinning feature as well.
Okay, thanks. So now I'm just going to tell you a little bit about a research survey. As I just mentioned, Overt is going through a similar process, and there was, a few people who were really concerned about the change going from horizontal to vertical. So we did a research study last month, actually, where we surveyed 28 people, and I'm just going to show you a couple of the main points. If we go to the next slide, overall, users prefer vertical navigation over horizontal. So you can see here on a scale of 1 to 5, where 5 was they really liked it, 1 was they really did not like it, 3 was kind of like they had no opinion. What is that? 24 out of the 28 people were very happy with the change from a preference perspective. And if we go to the next slide, we also talked about having the toggle only icon. And this was more of a, do you find this useful? Yes or no. So 80% of the people actually found that that was a useful feature. And the next slide just shows some of the quotes that were on that survey as well, just kind of backing up some of the comments. Of course, there were also 2 comments that people did not like. These ones were from the positive, but there were 2 comments that, probably from the people who had rated 1 or 2s on the previous slide. But for the most part, it's easier to read. It saves space on the widescreen monitors. People really think it looks a little bit more modern and looks really nice. So those are the results of the survey, and that was actually enough for the Overt team to go ahead and make this change. So they will be releasing that in their 4.2 release, which is, I think, upcoming in this next quarter. So that's all the upstream product examples that we wanted to show. And I guess I'll hand it back over to Rox.
Great. Okay. So that's kind of concludes the presentation portion of it. I don't know, Greg, how do we answer questions or panel, whatever you want to do?
Cool. No, that's cool. You've really blitzed through that. Caught me on the hop. Well done. So
I don't want to bore anybody. We don't want anybody to go to sleep.
You're not going to bore us. You're not going to bore us. It's fine, because I mean, anything that can generate the level of PR comments that we've had from a few people is clearly not going to bore people, right? So I think we've had a couple of things that came up in my head, and a few other people have mentioned just from the presentation before we get onto the panel. So, Serena, you mentioned, I think, Toma, you had a question about the negative comments, right? Was that from the survey data, right?
Yeah, just curious what they were.
Sure. Give me 1 second, and I will. I did not have that up, so let me just run back to the survey.
While you do you need a couple of minutes to pull that up? Yeah, cool.
Yes.
So
I have maybe
in that
another.
Case, oh, go on, Tom.
Yeah, maybe another question about the survey, about the users that did the survey. Were they existing users who are used to the old horizontal navigation, or are these new users that see this for the first time?
Yeah, so actually, I don't know. Let me see if I can go. Roxanne, can you show that deck again and just go back to the overt with the horizontal navigation?
Sure. 1 second.
So everybody who took the survey was an existing overt user using horizontal nav. So
Yeah, I guess doing something like A/B testing with new users is hard work, right? So.
right. So what we did, I don't know if you brought it up now. Oh, there we go. Yeah. So currently they're using this. So it's horizontal navigation. And so what the survey did was we allowed them to see a screenshot of what the new design was in the next slide. But we also offered the URL to the demo, which Roxanne just showed you guys. So it actually stepped through it. It allows you to access all the different pieces, whether it's pinning, the toggle only icon, that kind of thing. So we actually asked a few more questions in our survey. We asked them, because we also talked about grouping resources. So we did a little bit, if you look at the difference between this mock-up and the one before, our IA is different. So that was also included in the survey, just so you know. And we also talked about whether people preferred non-persistent secondary navigation or persistent. So again, if you go to the next slide, what we're showing here is if you hover over something, it would have a flyout versus the persistent one would be literally living there the entire time, and then you'd have less space for your working space. So there was a question on that on the survey as well. I can actually share my screen now and see. This was the negative comment, I think. It was nice, but disappearing. Animated navigation would be very annoying on low resolution screens. So that was the negative one.
That's a comment we've seen on the pull request as well, because we've had someone, I think Timo, who tends to use small. I'm thinking in my head, I've got an image of something like I have an old Atom EPC. It's like a 9-inch screen, right? They're tiny. So yeah,
right.
Difficult. But that leads me on to an interesting question, because you mentioned that the most common desktop resolution is 16:9, which is fair enough.
Yeah, it's not just 16:9.
What about?
It's getting larger, basically, and if you look, W3C tracks actually all the stats of that type of information, and it's not just common. It is like the vast majority. It is huge.
Sure, and that's what I'm interested in. It's not so much about the ratio, but actually the size of it, right? Because if we don't have too many people on small screens, then it's not such a big concern, right? But I wasn't sure what the breakdown was, because ratio and screen size are not the same thing, right? Do you have any data on that, or is it just in general we know they're getting larger?
That I didn't see it tracked there. They might have that data, but basically what I read is it's just getting larger. Even trying to, sure. I don't even know. I guess I just want to say, if you're trying to purchase a monitor, you know that the variety that you're going to even see at that size is decreasing. Because
I'm not too worried about monitors. They're always huge, right? That's just the nature of monitors. But I'm thinking about people who are taking their laptops into the data center.
But even the ratio of laptop 16:9, sometimes 16:9.
Yeah, but I can get a 16:9 laptop that's a 12-inch screen, right? And at that point, it gets quite claustrophobic along the side of the screen rather than the top of the screen, where there's actually still quite a bit of space.
Yeah, I mean, you're bringing up a good comment too, because I think one of the things that we were trying to do in OpenShift in the last 3 months is trying to figure out, even if you have a really wide monitor, are you actually looking at the application full screen, or are you, you know, using two browsers next to each other and that kind of thing.
Right.
It's hard to find that information out. We have been on the OpenShift side. I think it probably varies product to product as well. On the OpenShift side, we have been doing some customer interviews and trying to find out, and it sounds like for the most part, customers are looking at that like as on their full screen, but we haven't done an extensive survey.
Sure.
But again, satellite may be a little bit different, so that might be something that you might want to try to find out more.
I don't have statistics on this, so I really don't want to speak to it as a scientific thing, but I do have just more anecdotal from speaking to customers at different customer engagements that they oftentimes are shrinking the screen to run it half size or whatever, so that way they're kind of able to just use it as monitoring and they run something else or they have something else open.
Sure, sure.
In which case,
but this is interesting. Sorry, this is interesting. So there's two things there, because firstly, a couple of people on the chat are pointing out that obviously the icon view is good on a small screen, which is absolutely a fair comment. But also it leads into a point I think Ohad wanted to make about fixed versus full width content, right, Ohad? Because that kind of is relevant to your screen size.
Yeah, I think it's important to note that Foreman today basically has a mixture. Most of Foreman uses fixed width, which also was changed with part of this change of moving to vertical. And I think that was part also, at least one of the points that came up. Traditionally, we have supported, I think if I remember correctly, Patternfly support or doesn't really claim full or fixed width. Doesn't really care as much by default. But in the past, we've always preferred fixed width, or most of the time prefer fixed width, just that, less variations of content that we need to support, right? In terms of, as an engineer working on you don't need to think about how would it look in a really, really large display versus how would it look in a, various variation of the size. I think the change here also implies that we are aligning on full width, which is potentially, I don't necessarily have a strong opinion, but I know that it did lead to concerns because in the past, Catella would implement the full width, whereas, other portion of the UI would not, and that led to some, I think, unhappy users potentially. So it is interesting for me to think, to hear what is your opinion on that, and also if there is a middle ground, because I know every UI change is not, there would be people in favor and less favor of every UI change, but I do wonder what is the most common, if a user gets used to using it, is it by more often that he's using it in the minimized version where he has more of the real estate, or, how does, maybe from other experience, other projects, how does it actually, is there any recommendation on that?
I think, again, that's gonna come back to what type of user is it, right? So somebody who's more of an expert user who then knows the icons and doesn't need to see the labels is using probably a smaller screen would probably use the toggle only, icon only. But for a novice user, they're likely going to keep it showing the label constantly if they don't know what's available and they're just trying to discover what's in the app.
So I think this is a really good point. We've kind of got through the comments that immediately came up from the presentation. So let me just quickly introduce the rest of the last couple of people on the panel. So we have Walden with us, who's a member of mainly on the Catella team, who can speak. I'm going to come right back to him in just a second. We were supposed to have Timo, who's a very active community member, but sadly he hasn't been able to make it in time. I am watching for him. If he gets here, I'll bring him in. And we have Avod as well, another community member now. He's having issues with Hangout, so he is watching on YouTube, and I will relay his points and questions for him. Sadly, some weird browser inconsistency there. And the other names you got, and also you've already heard Ohad, who I'm sure most of you will already know, and Colleen, who joined us as well, who I didn't know was coming, so I didn't put you on the slide. I apologize. Coming straight back to Walden, then talking about Ohad's point about how Catella is all entirely full width, right? So I don't remember what happened with the full width versus fixed width debate. Can someone remind me?
Basically, nothing happened. We increased the fixed width on Foreman from, I think it was like 1,000 to 1,200 pixels or something like that. And Cotello is still all full width.
So just another case of us not making decisions. That sounds familiar.
Yeah, and I think the main issue we had with going to full width is that we have lots of screens that are just a table that has maybe 2 or 3 columns, and then when you see that full width on a large monitor, that's kind of empty, lots of empty space, and how to follow the lines and stuff.
Sure. I think I'm going to turn my video on for once in a very long time. So let me just back up a little bit. Let's talk about one of the things that came up on the pull request is a lack of alternatives, and that's a pretty contentious way of putting things. But it's a fair question, I think. I'm very interested in the survey data, but obviously we don't have equivalent survey data for the Foreman community, and perhaps that's something we should do. And I'd be quite interested. So people watching, if you're up for a survey, let me know. I'll probably do it anyway, but it'd be good to know. But well, in the absence of that data, then we have to talk about the possibility of what are the options? What can we put in front of people and say, how do we fix this, right? Because I think everyone agrees there's a problem. I don't think there's any contention about that. Is there, in your view, and this is open to anyone, is there, in your view, a way to make horizontal navigations work, or do you feel that vertical navigations is the only way forward?
It's not an only, I don't think it's an only issue. It's that, both navigations are very contextual in nature. If you know we have a limited handful of number of items that do not change, right? I think it's really kind of a toss-up what you prefer, but horizontal would work just fine. This is not, to me, this is not the case here. We have a large number of items static, and then we have some items added through plugins through the menu. That's what's causing the breakage, and that's where vertical nav basically says, I don't care how many items you have. I'll absorb it. I'll take it, I won't break. Horizontal nav doesn't do that. If we wanted to redo our entire nav and all the items, that's certainly an option, but I think we still end up having the whole plugin issue.
The plugins does seem to be the core of it, and Cotello is a really good example here, right? Because the amount that it adds. How much? So Walden, how much does this impact Cotello at all? Talk to me about that, because I'm really interested. Because there wasn't a lot of talk on the PR or on the discussion about this change from the Cotello side of things. Does this make things easier for you? Does it make it harder?
I don't know if it makes a difference easier or more difficult for Cotello. I mean, I can only speak for myself. My perspective is just that whatever UI we put into our application, if it's, it's better if it's tested and in front of users. What we currently have is never been tested until now, I guess. And so we don't really have much in the way of feedback of how our users interact with it. To Roxanne's point, though, I guess Cotello does add a lot of menu items, and that menu becomes very overwhelming. And I think the vertical allows more space for adding more items. And I guess my main point is, I just think that whatever we use should be tested. And our users should, I guess just user testing is my main thing. Sorry, I'm not a morning person, so this is a little early for me. But
I hear you. I hate mornings. Sadly, I've had to learn how to do mornings since having children, but I'm still not very good at them. Fortunately for me, this is not the morning. A few comments from Edward, since I said I'd relay them. He does indeed do the splitting thing that Serena mentioned, where you've got, or was it Rox? I'm sorry, I lose track very easily. About having two things on the one wide screen, so terminal and browser side by side. And I think this is probably quite a common thing amongst other administration type people.
And so what's interesting for that is that vertical would help that problem, actually, given the screenshots that Rox showed in the beginning, where when you make that browser smaller.
Breaking his nav. His nav's broken.
Yeah.
I wonder if actually, a point just occurred to me, and I wonder if some of the difference between the people who are very much in favor and the people who are very much against it are along the lines of the people who don't use Catello, and therefore don't really see the UI breaking to quite such the same extent because it just adds so many menu items. Right? You do have to have today at least. You do have to have quite a lot of plugins installed before you start to see it really fall apart, or quite a narrow screen, obviously.
Can I mention one other thing too about horizontal and scalability?
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that we did investigate was having a scrollable horizontal navigation system. And the problem with that is that, because we did go through this for a while, the problem with that is if you have something selected and you resize your browser, you may never know where your context is, right? Because that thing might scroll out of place. So we definitely, from a Patternfly perspective and from other products, we did look at other solutions. And came to our consensus that vertical was the best. But I would suggest if you guys are not comfortable, you could do some really quick usability testing. Like I mentioned, we've done it with Patternfly twice. We did it with Manage IQ, and we just did the survey with Overt. So if that would make people feel more comfortable, you might also be able to find little things you need to tweak for your product specifically.
What was your methodology? How did you do it? Was it literally just a case of putting a demo out there, putting a few screenshots up together, and then emailing that out to the Overt mailing list?
The survey, yes. Yeah, we also put it on social media.
Of course, yeah. I mean, obviously you publicize it where you can.
Right, and then we had a handful of people that we always get input from, so we specifically emailed those people as well to make sure that we got a base.
This is something that should happen. I mean, we did pretty well. I don't know if you know, we do a Foreman community survey every year, and sadly, they're usually at the start of the year, so we've already done one this year, and it would be the perfect thing to put in there. But I think it's fair to do more than one per year when there's a dedicated topic to talk about. But we got 200 responses to the Foreman community survey this year, so I wouldn't expect to get that high on a dedicated topic like this, but we still should get a reasonable sample and be able to make some confident statements from it. So,
yeah, I think we're going to need, when building that survey, to make sure we preface, like, who is this user, right? What do they do? What do they have installed? That makes a huge difference, right? You got a guy with only 4 menu items, he's not going to, might not care either way, right? But the guy who has 14, it's different.
Right.
And that we were able to find them and sort them.
There's a lot of love coming in for vertical on the YouTube chat, I'm seeing. So you guys have got some fans there. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else that's jumping into my mind. Edward's making an excellent point about it's a good opportunity to redo the menus anyway. We seem to do this every couple of years. I think this is the 3rd time already, not including what we're talking about now, but where we're at today is already the 3rd time I've had to relearn where all the menu items are. But he's right, and it is a good opportunity to regroup things. So that's an option as well.
Yeah, I guess my main objection would be that we force our users to relearn the muscle memory of where everything is. If it was a new app, yeah, sure, why not? But people who are used to working with it daily, and now they have to retrain their hands to make sure that everything all of the usual clicks aren't memorized anymore. So other than that, if we do a survey and see that the results are that people are in favor, then sure. I did ask the PR, and I'm curious about what you would say about it. Is what would be the minimum screen width that we want to support actually? Because even with the current lots of plugin scenario, it only breaks it around 1200 pixels width, and even that can be reduced just by playing around with the code. I got it down to like around 900 pixels, just reducing a bit of the padding and just a tad bit of the font size. I know it's not ideal, but if you're on a low resolution monitor anyway, that doesn't matter that much, because the smaller size is still big enough. And one last comment I want to make is that I've heard of people actually using Foreman on iPads and tablets, going through the data center and checking hosts, etc. So I'm not sure how that would look on a screen that's, I think, maybe 9 to 16 instead of 16 to 9.
Oh, you can always turn it around.
Yeah, you could.
Yeah, so, you know, when you start looking at more mobile devices and tablets and things like that, I mean, that probably, that's where vertical nav, I think, shines the most, because at those things, they're kind of blowing down to that anyway. So that, I think that goes back to the point where vertical nav is consistent all the way until really the smallest one, where you start going to just pure hamburger menu. So that's where you get that consistency almost all the way through the experience, right? So if they're on a desktop, nav's the same. They go to an iPad, nav's the same. They go to their mobile phone, that's when they really start seeing a big change.
Or even, to be fair, even in mobiles, the trend seems to be to the swipe in vertical navigation on the left-hand side. I've seen that on so many apps now, right? So not that I'm saying we could do that directly, but just that the people are used to seeing it there.
Yeah, I'm all for swipe stuff if we want to.
No, I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying that in terms of what people are used to, where they look for things, it's going to be on that left-hand side, right? Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to point out that oftentimes we think, you know, there's really no information loss on vertical nav because people are used to looking at bulleted lists, right? Your grocery shopping list, your financials, the table of contents of a book. So there's no real information loss to go in that direction. It's a perfectly natural, readable system, especially when you're looking at, these are just individual words that may be related, but form no large narrative, meaning there's no paragraph here, right? It's a single word that's easily scannable.
Fair. So I've given Timo as much time as I can to join. Sadly, it looks like he's not going to be able to join us. So I am just going to quickly read off his points from his GitHub PR. Not that I'm not making a good or bad statement about this. I just promised that I would make sure he got his representation. And I think some of these have already been addressed later in the PR, but just because this is a very nicely created bullet point list. He also makes the point about confusing users who don't use Foreman on a regular basis. I would not necessarily agree with that. I would say it will confuse people who use it on a regular basis. The people who don't use it would have to learn where everything is anyway. Right, and we've made that point about having to relearn where everything is. So that's fine. He suggests there should be a switch to return to the old design. That sounds like a lot of overhead to maintain. He says it looks like the new GitLab design, which they also complain about. That's a non-point if you ask me, because we're already talking about how this is in relation to other upstream products as well. GitLab is just another one that's doing it, so fair enough. They like the tab feeling at the top. Okay. Taxonomy is interesting, and I know, Rox, you've been looking into how to do the organization and location switches, right?
Yep, I have been. It's really, when you break it down, it's a kind of a universal filter of all the content below. I think there was an OpenShift example actually addressed it, and that was what I was sort of modeling after, because they have the same issue, whereas there is a top level filter that's driving everything below it. So that is something that we've been looking at. It can still be put into the vertical nav. It's just when I was looking at how does that all drive, how does that influence everything else, it made more sense to put it somewhere else. But that's sort of still in development.
Fair enough. Just picking up some comments from around. So there's one other, I think he had a couple of points about the colors, but colors are something we can always debate on the PR anyway. I personally would be a fan of keeping the font colors.
I guess I do have one comment about color that's important, is that, so I know there was a possible suggestion of shrinking horizontal nav in space and text. When you start doing that, there is actually a recommended font size for things before it becomes not as readable for, say, an older gentleman, not necessarily vision impaired, but also it affects the color contrast. So the smaller the text, yes, the smaller the text, the higher you need that contrast in order to actually have it be readable and passable for people with actual visual impairment. So, you know, it affects color because if you want to maintain the Foreman brand, there is a certain text level that needs to be maintained for it to be readable for people with vision impairment, period. And that's not my standard. That's just what it
That's
is.
just recommendations. So we got to remember 20% of web users are disabled in some way, right? So, or have issues in some way. So we got to make it.
Well, and just remember, I think this is fair to say, probably most network admins are men, and they are more likely to suffer from color blindness as well. So that's why I always tend to bring up the color blindness issue. And I have typically had users say they are colorblind and that they have problems.
That's always potential as well, but then we can never get away from that. The colorblind is the one issue I don't think you can do a lot if you want to maintain your brand, right? But font and contrast and so on, yes. So I'm just going to quickly skip through IRC and YouTube and have a quick look at the comments. So Avud's got a few points. Usability, he likes horizontal expansion better than vertical expansion. I'm not quite sure what he means. Oh, so he means things sliding in from the left, I guess, because you have to make weird angle with vertical menus. I don't know what he means by that. You'll have to clarify, Edward. So he says the main navigation should not require expansion. And YouTube chat, what have we got here? Again, still lots of people saying that they like it. Some being more forceful than others. I think... Yes, I think that's mostly just it. People looking for videos or screenshots, which I had as supplied. It's all looking brilliant.
I think there's one comment here which does make sense. I think from Matt Darcy, hope I pronounce your name correctly, where he's looking for not to making a change at a time, and have a more consistent plan going forward to how the app should look and evolve. Especially, for example, when moving to fixed width to full width, there's obvious changes. It impacts most of the application, especially in places that there's not a lot of content to show. And I think overall, I totally agree that we need to have like a more detailed plan. And I think that's happening regardless now in how the application will move into, or how basically we all want to move to the pattern fly standards. There's no question, right? So. And we want to align and remove the two panes and other things that we're talking about. So I'm semi-answering, semi-asking, but I think the point is that we do want to move to pattern fly standards. Obviously, we believe this is the right way for us as a project, leveraging all the good work that has been done there. And I don't know if just you can reply on the YouTube chat if there's anything more particular and specific that you want in terms of how would you want to have a UI plan going forward, right? Because I'll use this for vertical navigation is one thing, but we definitely want to have a long-term plan to how our UI will adapt or grow, or whatever the term is going forward. And also use this opportunity to share that we are doing more or less on a weekly cadence UI review with Roxanne, where we go page by page and pretty much highlighting all the bad stuff in it and trying to address those items. So this is effectively what we've been doing in order to get to a better shape, and also to see what are the low-hanging things we can do in the near future. In terms of longer terms designs, I think that just to use the stage again, we are using the developer channel to share the designs and let people know about what do we think is problematic, and we encourage everyone to be involved in this process as well.
Absolutely.
That's the gist. If anyone else has any.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the reason we're doing it. So go on, Rox.
I was just going to point out, and I agree with having a more detailed plan, but this is why we want to have it, right? Vertical nav. We're talking about just the nav, but there are potential future implications of that nav that could be very helpful, and there could be some that aren't. But we're looking at potentially, well, how can we make tables more customizable, right? They can turn on and off columns. There's other parts of the UI that if we decide to go with or not go with, could be a pro or a hindrance. It's all kind of interconnected in that way. So I agree with your statement on a plan.
Yeah, plans are always great. They never last very long, but they are great to have.
It makes us feel better. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. It feels like you're going in a particular direction, even when you're probably not. My Hangout is frozen. I don't know if I'm still online.
You are.
I am. Okay, my desktop just completely hung there. I have no idea what that was. So where was I? Completely threw me. Yes. So I think the survey sounds like an excellent plan. I really feel like that's a good thing to do. I would. So I'm happy to try and take that out there, because I think in the dev community we get very hung up on certain ways of doing things, and it's great to take this to the users because they're the ones who are most impacted by this. It's all very well having our discussion on the PR, and that's great. But it's always going to be a small sample, and it's always going to be a highly opinionated sample as well. So I will probably try and work something out in the near future on that and get some more opinions, because I think that's a very, very good thing to do. And I'm grateful to Serena for her data on that, because I think that's a good springboard. For next things to do, this obviously is one video with a small amount of people who were able and willing at this time slot to come and view it. We need to get more people to comment. So for all you people watching live right now, for all you people watching it on YouTube in the future, please come and give us some feedback. We need to hear about it. So mailing lists is the place to go. There will be a thread there, which I will reply to very shortly to bring it back to the top of the list. Please go and put your thoughts on there. Tell us what you think. For all that we have these lovely comments going on in our YouTube live chat at the moment, they will disappear the minute the broadcast finishes. So we need to hear about it. For now, though, unless anyone has any final comments they'd like to make, give that a moment. No? Okay, good. In that case, I'll quickly share my closing slide. Normally, I don't bother to turn my video on, right, because you guys are used to seeing my slide decks all the time. So in that case, once again, thank you all for watching. Thanks to all the presenters for their time today. Very glad to have you on. And for everybody watching, thank you. Do take care.